Hello, I'm Lynne Franks, your host, and welcome to my latest podcast episode of Frankly Speaking with Lynne Franks and Friends. My very special guest today is Hester Grainger. Hester was diagnosed with ADHD at 43, and as a former TV and radio presenter, she became a certified ADHD coach, keynote speaker, and co-founder of neurodiversity consultancy, Perfectly Autistic. Hester launched Perfectly Autistic in 2020 with her husband Kelly after he was diagnosed as autistic and with ADHD. They support companies with neurodiversity trainings, talks, workplace mediations and ADHD coaching. So many of us today suspect or have actually proven that we suffer from ADHD. I am absolutely sure I've had it, which makes me understand a lot of my behaviour patterns. So Hester and I go into depth together on what to look out for and how to use ADHD as our superpower. Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking with Lynne Franks and Friends. And today I am with the amazing Hester Grainger, who I have come to know and love over the last 6 months, as I have been coaching her as she builds up to what is going to be, and already is really, an explosion in her career. And at the same time, like many women, is juggling family, children, relationship, staying healthy, and all the rest. So welcome, Hester, to probably, how many podcasts have you done in the last couple of weeks other than mine?
Quite a few, but I love it. I still love it. Being able to talk to people, that's how I get my coins and my dopamine. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, so lovely to have you here, and a slightly different way of talking today, because I'm going to be asking you all the questions that I don't have the time necessarily to ask you in our sessions, because we talk about so many ideas and we sort of creatively buzz so much together. So this is about digging a little deeper into how your extraordinary life sort of started off. So when you started your career, tell me a little bit about your career, because I know you were in TV, you were in PR, you were presenting. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, I think in true ADHD style, I go right back to the beginning. And I remember wanting to be a TV presenter when I was like 7. So I'd run around my sitting room shouting, like, "Stop the clock, I found a clue." Like I was in this jumpsuit. I thought I was Annika Rice. I had these like massive headphones on and I'd use the end as a microphone. So I've always kind of had that in me that I really, really wanted to be a presenter. And I think sometimes when you've got ADHD, there's like you want it now. And actually other times you can really play the long game. And I just like played the longest game with wanting to be a TV presenter. So when I went to uni, I got through GCSEs just, got through A-levels just, got to uni just.
And were you aware in those just days that there was anything different about you and the other students?
No, I just knew I had to work like really, really hard. And I was really driven. And when I went to see the careers advisor, so I'm 47, so it was the 90s. I was at high school and I went to see the careers advisor, who knew nothing about me. I was telling my teenage daughter this the other day, knew nothing about me. And she went, "I don't think you'll probably get to uni. You should be a secretary." And like, there's nothing wrong with being secretary, because my mum was literally a medical secretary. But I was like, screw you. And I said to India, that was almost what made me go, "I'll prove you wrong." And we were laughing because obviously
I was told to be a secretary and I went and did secretarial training. I don't even think they had secretaries when you were young. We'd sort of got over that by then. I was a secretary for a little while, not very long.
But isn't that a funny, like almost like, oh, you can go and be a secretary, like that's all you can amount to. Like, A, that's not a great job, but B, you don't know me. And I remember being like, oh, well, I want to be like a presenter, or I want to be a personal shopper. So I did like to spend money. And I just remember thinking like, right, I'm from Ipswich, from like a small village in Suffolk, just outside Ipswich. And, nothing wrong with Ipswich, but it's not my bag. And I just wanted to go and live my best life somewhere with nightclubs and loads of nightlife. And I just kind of wanted to get out of Ipswich. So I ended up going to Leeds, but Met, I always state this because obviously there's Leeds Uni and then there's Leeds Met, which is like the old Poly. And my mum would tell everyone I went to uni in Leeds and would miss out the Met bit. And I was like, I'm the first one out of my siblings and anyone to go to like uni. So like, let's not be snobby about where I'm going, but that's fine. So ended up at uni and I did modules, and I really wanted to do psychologist when I thought I could be a TV psychologist like Fraser Crane. So I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. This is how my whole brain works. It's like, this is what I'm going to do. And then literally the first term, they were like, we're dropping psychology as a module. I wasn't clever enough to do pure psychology. So I was like, what else can I do? And they're like, well, media. And I'd already done media studies, GCSE and A level. So I really wanted to get into TV. So I wrote to Yorkshire Television in Leeds, and they replied going, all our places, all our work experience goes to the media studies students at Leeds Uni. You're at the Met. And I was like, okay. So I said, I'm from Ipswich. So I decided to write to Anglia Television in Norfolk and be like, I remember it was on pink paper. Like the most clueless sure thing ever, isn't it? Pink paper. And I sent like a photo, like a Polaroid of myself, a headshot, being like, I really want to work in television. And they were like, yeah, sure, like we'll have some work experience. So I went and did work experience. I worked on like the Trisha show and other, I've been working with Jermaine Greer. So
Yes, she lived around there somewhere, didn't she? Cambridgeshire.
Yeah, I remember I had to iron her trousers, her linen trousers. That was a random flashback. I wasn't expecting to share that, but I remember that. And so I just did work experience. And then in my holidays, I would come back from Leeds and work, and then I get paid to work at Anglia. And that was like my summer job. And then after uni, I worked for like an electricity board, having to detect where power cuts were. And obviously that was really boring. I didn't really know, so I'd make it up. So I'm really sorry about that. I don't really know what the impact was, but I was like, oh, it was there.
The whole of Anglia closed down.
Completely. That was just it. Like, Ipswich and Suffolk, it just was not working for power cuts. And then I got a phone call saying, we've got this new show launching called The Right Stuff. Do you want to come and be an audience researcher? You need to get the audiences in the morning.
That was Matthew Wright's, which still isn't still running, I think, isn't it?
So Jeremy Vine's taken over that,
yeah.
But Matthew Wright ran it for like 20 years.
I was on it, I think, a couple of times when it was in London, yeah.
Yeah, and Kate Silverton and James O'Brien and
who took over from him when he'd have his holidays? The person that you just said that you used to.
James O'Brien.
No, the woman. Oh,
Kate Silverton.
Yeah, no, it was the woman that you loved, run around in the jumpsuit that jumped in and out.
Annika Rice.
Annika Rice, sorry to be so sorry, Annika. Yeah, when I was on, it was Annika Rice, funnily enough, presenting it because she took over a couple of times from him.
Yeah, she was great. I just the whole concept was actually really clever, and I think that's why it ran for so long. And then I ended up being booth girl, as it was called. The person who was booth girl originally took some time off, and I was like, well, I can fill in. And they were like, we've never presented before. And I was like, it doesn't matter. Like, just give me a shot. And that's, I think, the ADHD, not knowing, having ADHD, but going, I can do that. Yeah, there's like almost.
Did people even talk about ADHD in those days?
No. ADHD was boys in school, still quite similar to what it is now, throwing, tables across classrooms. That was the perception. If you had ADHD, you could only be diagnosed with ADHD as an adult in 2008. So this, it wasn't even a thing. You were just expected to grow out of it. But when on air sign would light up, the dopamine, the chemical that quite often lacking when you've got ADHD, just would be like bing, 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 bing. It was just the best thing ever for an ADHD brain.
Yeah, I can imagine. So it didn't work out with The Right Show. You'd done at that point the TV presenting. Where did you go from there? Was that when you went into PR?
Yeah,
which is also, sorry to interrupt you, but PR, two ADHD people interrupting each other. But yeah, of course, PR is a perfect profession, as I know only too well myself, for someone with ADHD and dopamine hits because you're all the time.
Your ideas, your events, you're in-house, or you're working for, an agency, as you well know, and all that brings, and I think, The Right Stuff was on for a year. It then got taken over by another production company, and they moved all the crew and wanted a completely fresh start with like a booth girl. So I'm 4'11" and they hired this like tall, leggy blonde. I was like, okay, fine. Meanwhile, I met a very nice man called Kelly, who I had known from when I was 15, but I'd not seen him for years. He turned on the telly one morning and saw me on there. He'd pulled a sickie that day from work, and he thought, oh, I know her, that's Hester. And he got in touch with me and went on a date, and that was it. And that was 20 years ago.
That was meant to happen in every way.
Wasn't it? Just fate. So then we went traveling to Australia, came back, and I ended up lined a job up before. So I ended up working back at Anglia Television as a production manager for Animal Cops, which was like a RSPCA show in New York. So did that for 18 months. Then I moved to London, worked on Loose Women behind the scenes, Today with Des and Mel. And I used to speak to the girls who would send me press releases, and boys, men and women, send me press releases.
Excuse me interrupting again, sorry. Yeah. But you never came across somebody called Josh Howie, who was like this kid that was helping with Mel and Sue. I only mention that because that's my son. That's where he started when he was about 16 or 17.
Oh my goodness. There's so many crossovers, isn't there, within PR and within the TV world?
Yeah.
But it was, I then would get, obviously PR companies would get in touch because they'd want their products or their surveys or whatever it was on air. And I remember talking to these girls at Hill and Knowlton PR agency, and I was like, so how long's your contract for? Because at the time I was like 3 months, 4 months contract. And obviously that's not very stabilizing for an ADHD person. It's not very, not very good for your stability kind of thing. And they were like, oh no, we don't like have a contract. And I I remember being like, so like you can't get fired. They were just like, well, no, we can. But I was just like, well, this is amazing. And so I went and did work experience at 28 with Hill and Knowlton in London. And I went and did 2 weeks work experience to see what that would be like. I then got offered a job on 60-Minute Makeover, which I didn't take. It's like this TV show where you literally made over someone's house in 60 minutes. And meanwhile, Kelly and I went for lunch. We lived in Clapham, went to Reading for the day and bought.
I used to live in Clapham when I first got married,
Did
so
you?
more synergy.
So many synergies out there with us. This is what's so funny. Yeah, so we lived off Clapham High Street. We lived St Luke's Avenue. So I was talking about this with a client yesterday, actually. We talked about Infernos, what an amazing club. And then there was like this gay club called Two Brewers that we go with our friends to and stuff. And then we went to Reading for lunch for fun because we were bored and that's what we'd do. Neither of us knew we had ADHD, Kelly and I. And we saw this flat and we went, oh my God, this is really nice. And we'd bought a flat in London and it had fallen through. So we went, should we just buy it? And we were like, yeah, let's buy it. So we went to the cash point and got out as much from our overdraft as we could and went in with cash and just went, here's like a small deposit. Can we buy a flat, please? And that's how we moved to Reading. And I didn't know I had ADHD.
Amazing. And so at this point, you moved to Reading, you were doing PR. How did you find out you got ADHD? And in fact, that Kelly has it and also is autistic, and you both come from, well, anyway, let's see how you found it out all out.
So I'd got India at this point. She was 18 months old. She's now 15. The girl did not stop talking. But obviously, with my very high word count, I didn't think anything of it. We then moved again, not knowing with ADHD. You know, you move a lot, you get bored, whatever, change jobs, change houses, change locations.
I always thought that was me. I thought the reason I kept moving was just because I kept moving. Of course, it's because of ADHD, isn't it?
And you're like, how exciting, moving somewhere new. We think how exciting is house hunting or moving to a new area. You don't know anyone. You've got to meet new people, which feels
or even in my case, I moved different countries. I went to LA, I went to Spain, and oh God, I've got to learn a new way of driving on the other side of the road. How exciting. Yeah, it's so much clicks in once you realize about ADHD patterns, doesn't it?
It's the dots, isn't it? So then I then had Hudson. So there's a 2-year gap. So Hudson's now 13. And when he was quite little, he had like high arches and he had to like have his feet sort of not measured, but like take a mold for his feet. And he was absolutely screaming the place down. And the consultant was like, I just wonder if there's like sensory issues. And he said, I wonder if he's autistic. And Hudson was 3 at this time. And then within that same like breath, he literally went, oh, but he can't be because look how affectionate he is with you and look how much he makes eye contact. So I didn't really think anything more of it. Hudson's had loads of eating issues and doesn't eat anything other than sliced bread, genuinely. And so it wasn't until they were 7 and 9 that we started to look and think, actually, things over the years kept cropping up. And in all honesty, I was like, no, the reason Hudson wears a 3-piece suit is because it's cute. And it's like, you know, people dress up as Batman and he dresses up in a 3-piece suit and he'd be like this little bow tie and like, oh my God, the boy was so cute. Still does love a suit now, but he's like 13. He's like, maybe not so much.
Very, very funny.
But
he sounds like Sheldon Cooper in the Big Bang Theory, but young Sheldon.
It's that kind of almost cliche. Oh, small autistic child loves a bow tie, loves to dress up. But again, you're almost then masking a bit, aren't you? You're putting on a role. You're kind of like, I'm in a suit and
I'm a little grown up as well.
Well, and Kelly would go to work in suits. So that was Kelly and Hudson are like peas in a pod. So they were diagnosed, both children were diagnosed pretty much the same time. India a little bit later, but they went through the diagnosis process at the same time. And off the back of that, I would send information to Kelly and say, I've got this information back from the psychologist about Hudson. And he would reply, you sure that's about Hudson? Because that sounds like me. And that's when Kelly realized he was autistic. So he was officially diagnosed at 44. And
is it hereditary or can it be hereditary?
Yeah, there's very strong links, sort of genetic links. So what often happens is you get parents, and I speak to so many of them who are now realizing, oh, okay, my children are being diagnosed. But you don't think, unless your children are very high needs, sort of high support needs, I just thought India's cute and funny, and she talks loads like me, and Hudson's really quiet, just like his daddy, and isn't that cute? And didn't really think that we were neurodivergent at all. And then it was during lockdown we all realised that the children had ADHD because they're processing, and autism and ADHD or neurodiversity often go hand in hand, co-conditions. And I think that's really important to remember, because I can't remember what year it was you were able to be diagnosed as autistic and ADHD. That's like quite a new thing. They were like, you're autistic or you're ADHD, but actually you can be ADHD, so AUDHD, where the conditions overlap. But the same with dyslexia, Tourette's, OCD, dyspraxia, etc. A lot of the conditions, you don't just tend to have one neurodivergent condition. So I was diagnosed at 44. And
how do they diagnose? Because I go around saying these days, my dog wants to jump on my lap. That's why you can hear growling noises. My dog is definitely ADHD. Oh no, he's gone the other way.
There's a book called All Dogs Have ADHD. And
no, really?
It's the best book ever. However old you're, All Birds Have Anxiety. It's a series by Kathy Wassel, I think. All Dogs Have ADHD. All Cats Are Autistic. And it was my son that once pointed out, he was like, God, Mika definitely is autistic. And I was, our cat, why do you think that? Well, she walks off mid-conversation. She won't make eye contact. She will let me hug her and stroke her sometimes, but not other times. And then on the flip side, we've got Roscoe, we've got two dogs, Roscoe and Bear, Cocker Spaniels. I mean, Roscoe is the most ADHD dog ever because he is a Cocker Spaniel.
Oh, you haven't met Bear. In fact, I've got both my cat and my dog at my feet as we're speaking, and both behaving exactly like the cat has got autism, and the dog is definitely behaving like ADHD, barking and being frenetic. Extraordinary. How did we ever exist before we knew about all this? A bit like the menopause, really. We're not really like the menopause, but suddenly the menopause was acknowledged, and we were all talking about it. And now, and of course, as you said, for so many years, it was young boys that were considered to have ADHD, particularly. And suddenly, it's like women in their 70s, like me, are realizing that our patterns are because we're neurodiverse. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that's who we are.
It's a different way of thinking. It's differences shouldn't be viewed as scary. If you think of all your creativity, your innovation, everything you've achieved, that be because of your ADHD brain, not in spite it. But equally, on the flip side, I bet there'll be loads of times when you're like, how have I got myself into this? Or
oh my God, on a daily basis.
Well, exactly, you still do it.
Why did I move house again? Why did I sell that house? Why did I do this? Why did I do that?
Yeah. And it's that I was 43 when I was diagnosed, and there's a real link between perimenopause and ADHD and hormones in general. So, if you've got teenagers, this is why quite often the wheels fall off, as we call it, with girls being diagnosed they're autistic, because they hit, hormonal
puberty,
hit puberty, going to high school, which is all changing. And same with boys as well with hormones. And I'm very open about my perimenopause journey generally, and with my kids as well. And I'll say to Hudson, God, you're having that end, you're, hormones and puberty, and I'm this end, and we're both neurodivergent. So that's just a lot. So there's loads of really, I'm not an expert at all on perimenopause and do not claim to be at all, but there's lots of research on perimenopause and ADHD. And I kind of got to my 40s and just felt like the wheels are falling off. That's all I could describe it as. Whereas before I felt like I had it all together. Didn't always, but it kind of felt a bit more seamless. And now it just feels carnage. It's the hormones.
It's the hormones. I mean, it's women with the hormones and ADHD and all the other pressures that come when you're in your mid to late 40s, whether it be teenage children or taking care of parents or whatever it may be. I mean, it's amazing we survive at all. I was actually listening to something the other day about neurodiversity and then it became very obvious to me, and I can't remember who was speaking, but it was like how it's so important that we have neurodiversity and we have different people with different patterns and different tendencies, because that's how the world is. And it's only when we get to school, which is of course younger and younger, and we're sort of put through into these kind of narrow silos, that we have to behave a certain way. I was always in trouble with school. I left school with four O levels, sorry. That was a fluke. And I was in trouble all the time for looking out the window and dreaming. But of course, the children who are the dreamers, that look out of the window, they're the creatives. They're the ones that are not comfortable being put in a narrow silo, want to be out and create new ideas and do different things and write and paint and go into nature. And we need to encourage it. So it's incredibly important work, the work that you and Kelly are doing. So to get back to your story, though, so you've brought Hudson and India up in a way which is conducive to their neurodiversity. And of
unintentionally,
course, sorry,
completely unintentionally.
right.
We've always been very low pressure. I remember having, this is really random me sharing, but I remember having like setting up like a Next account so that I could buy all of their school uniform, but in every different size, every different type of black skirt there was. Excuse me, then I didn't have to pay for it, and then I could just send it all back again because the sensory aspect was just too much. We've always done this. I remember having to find Hudson's. We found this lovely little quilted coat he loved from Next year they didn't sell it, but he still wanted it, so I bought that same coat from eBay every year, it sizing up as we went, because that's what he wanted. He loved the coat. I remember India had this mustard jumper from New Look. She loved it so much we had 3 of the exact identical jumpers, and she'd wear these exact leggings.
So
But
funny.
I
I
didn't know
mean,
that was autism. And
yeah, no, I get it. I had a very close woman friend who sadly passed away, who was top fashion PR and stylist in New York, and a very creative, extraordinary woman. And she, quite at a different end of the scale, would go into Dior and buy 3 duffel coats exactly the same because they might run
yeah,
out. And now I realize her pattern. I
yeah.
never went into Dior and bought 3 duffel coats, but nor could I ever afford to. But
But
actually, it was Chanel. It wasn't Dior at all. It was Chanel.
that's what she felt safe with, and she knew.
Yeah.
And also, it's interesting you said about the panic of running out. I mean, just sitting here, they're actually slightly different colors. I've got about 4 of these. They're only cheap Rimmel lip gloss. I'm so worried they're going to stop selling this color. I panic buy certain things at certain times. Look
Yeah.
behind me, I've got 2. I don't need 2 of these matching boxes. I don't know why, but I just buy everything in
Well,
2.
I'm even worse in the kitchen, and my kids used to really tease me about this, and my former husband used to have a go at as well. But there were certain things that I would buy masses of. Lemons. I mean,
Right.
you could hardly ever run out of lemons and not be able to get some more. I would have cupboards full of lemons, cupboards full of bread, salt,
What
certain type of
what would
salt.
you what would you worry about with lemons?
I never have enough in the house when I needed them. So I'd have like 20 and never use them. I realize now so much about the patterns that I've had over the years that
Hmm.
my father was bipolar, and his 2 brothers were as well. And my father always used to ask my ex-husband, have you seen anything in her? Is she like going the same way? And I'd go,
Yeah.
certainly not. But of course, there's some connection with some kind of mental illness or mental health, or it's not illness, it's health, it's
Yeah.
diversity, it's whatever it is.
Well, so there's mental health and then neurodiversity. So they're 2 separate
Course. In
things.
my father's case, it was mental. They treated it as
Yeah,
mental health.
you can have poor mental health or good mental health as well. Mental
Mm,
health doesn't have
true.
to be a bad thing. And then obviously on this side, you've got neurodiversity. If you are neurodivergent living in a neurotypical world, so the world not set up for autistic, ADHD, dyspraxic, dyslexic, Tourette's people, etc., then naturally your mental health can suffer because your needs aren't being met. Like the work we do at Perfectly Autistic in workplaces, neurodiversity consultancy, working with organizations to help them understand how amazing their neurodivergent workforce are. But actually you've got, Kelly being autistic in the corporate world, head of sales, etc., for big corporate companies. That's not a very autism friendly job / role or
Which is
position.
why I wanted to ask you at this point
Yeah.
about Perfectly Autistic and Perfectly
Yeah.
ADHD, because you and Kelly realized having both had fantastic careers, very successful careers, actually. If you look back, it was
Mm.
time to do something that was more suited for your lives and for your knowledge, increased knowledge about your own patterns of behavior and neurodiversity. So that's how long ago did you set up?
So it's
Um,
been 5 years.
okay.
And the reason we set it up was because when Kelly decided to disclose to his company, to his boss, that he was autistic, he'd kind of worked out exactly what he was going to say, plucked up the courage, and he rang his boss. And if you're autistic, quite often you can have these conversations like in your head, work out their responses, so you then have a response back, etc. So Kelly had like done all this, and then his boss, when he told him, Kelly sort of said, the children have been diagnosed autistic. I identified a lot with that. I've received a formal diagnosis as well. And his boss laughed and went, we don't look autistic. And in the next breath, he just said, I thought you had a stick up your ass. And Kelly was like, that was not on the list of what may come back conversations. HR rang up the next day and apologized, obviously. And Kelly just decided that wasn't the place for him. And when we looked into it more and talked to different people, a lot of people had really, really negative experiences of, as we call it, coming out at work. So we launched Perfectly Autistic, doing talks, training, workshops, workplace mediation, obviously coaching, which is sort of Perfectly ADHD side of it, and work with all size organizations, but a lot of large corporate companies, because that's our background. Sort of mine with 20 years in PR and sort of Hitachi and, Mars drinks and BMW
It's
outfit.
like you were in training, really, weren't you?
Isn't it odd though how you then look back at your life? And so Kelly started out working in London as a headhunter doing recruitment, so he literally knows what it's like to recruit teams, to interview people, to manage people. And then obviously he ran big teams, you know, having to grow them and push them, and this is what we need, and new business. And you look back and we've got all this experience all brought together. It's just the most random thing, and it's magical because we now get to work with organizations. We only work with people we like. I've said this to you before, haven't I? We only work with companies that align with our values. If they don't, we genuinely would just be like, yeah.
And you're working, can you talk about any of the companies you're working for? Because you're
Yeah.
working with some incredible big corporations and advising them now on neurodiversity.
Yeah. Yeah, we do a lot of work with TUI. Obviously the holiday company, we trained 2,000 of their retail staff last year.
Amazing.
Kelly did a lot of that, but I did some as well. But yeah, that was his big chunk. Really about neuro-inclusive holidays, and we used our lived and learned experience to talk about us as a family, what it's like to travel, but also Kelly being autistic ADHD adult in the airport on holiday, what those
So what are the
challenges.
sort of things that TUI would do to accommodate neurodiverse families or children at least?
That's
What
such a
sort
good
of...
question. There are so many things. What you do is you go into a store or ring up online or book. You then get you can either be dealt with in person or get directed to the assisted travel team. There's things they offer now, like excess baggage, for example, whereas before that was only seen as like medical. So say if you needed like incontinence pads or extra, you know, medication or things that would take up more room in your suitcase. Whereas, for example, Hudson only eats Nutella sandwiches and Dairy, but obviously you can't really fly with Dairy. So, for example, we'd have to take a kilo jar away of Nutella so we can have Nutella and bread in case where we go doesn't sell it. But we then wouldn't have to pay extra for that luggage. So it's based on a case by case basis. But there's so many things they'll put into place, and they'll just, you know, show floor plans and photos and just work with each family so different. And you don't have to have kids for this to, you know, for the neuro-inclusive holidays, but it's all based on a case by case basis. But it's them having that understanding and the staff being able to ask the right questions to maybe then go, do you know what, this is a really busy hotel, it's got X, Y, and Z. Have you thought about this hotel? Because this will be quieter. This might suit your needs better. Maybe the transfer.
Wonderful.
It's so good.
Very progressive.
Yeah, it's such a great idea. We were so glad we've been able to work with them on that, and our work with them is ongoing as well. They're now training their staff internally as well to be able to support their staff, which is super important.
Yeah.
We also work with Red Bull Racing. We're on their neurodivergent journeys, partners with them, which is just insanely cool. Kelly's been a Formula One fan since the 80s. So that's just like a dream come true for him. And they're on a neurodiversity journey. We've been working with them. We sponsored, excuse me, the Milton Keynes Umbrella Project.
Yes, do you want to explain a little bit about the Milton Keynes umbrella? Because I saw the picture of you on social media, was surrounded by lots and lots of umbrellas in Milton Keynes. Thought, there she is.
Yeah, there we have in Milton Keynes. So Red Bull are based in Milton Keynes. The Neurodiversity Umbrella Project was born from ADHD Foundation. So the amazing Tony Lloyd, who's just retired, who's absolutely amazing, from ADHD Foundation. And basically it's awesome art installations. I'm doing this because they're normally up high. Awesome art installations of umbrellas, because when you talk about neurodiversity, it's almost like they use it as an umbrella term, and then underneath that you've got different conditions.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that, because it's become a generic, when actually it's obviously a lot more complex than that.
Yes, but equally they're lovely and colourful and bright. So
the umbrellas are. Yes.
The umbrellas are, yeah. And then in Milton Keynes, it was the largest art installation around neurodiversity in the UK. And we were super proud to be gold sponsors, joint gold sponsors with Red Bull Racing. And it was just fantastic. I did a couple of talks on the day. We shared a stand with Red Bull. They were talking about their amazing STEMX scheme that they do, which they run with schools and home education settings to get like young people into STEM, which is really cool. And we're on a journey with them on their ADHD and autism coach as well. So it's just like, it's very cool, because you mentioned before in PR, and we do loads of work with PR agencies, because like, you know, Formula One, there's a really high percentage, or there will be a high percentage of neurodivergent people, whether they realize it or not, because 20% of the population are neurodivergent, 50% of those don't realize it, because I got to
that's
my
big figures. That's big figures. So it's almost like in the old days, were I still running a PR company, it'd be one of the things I would ask them, and it would be a tick if they were neurodiverse, because it meant they were more creative. Well, you can't generalize like that, but
no, but I know, yes, with being neurodivergent comes creativity, innovation, different ways of thinking, which naturally, you know, I was training pilgrims last week who made like Richmond sausages and lovely things. And, you know, I was saying, think of the product development that you need. And, you know, I was talking to Diageo last week as well. I did a talk for them. You know, they're Bacardi and Smirnoff and Seedlip as well, the amazing non-alcoholic drink that they bought from Ben Branson, who's neurodivergent, autistic ADHD, late diagnosed. You know, and all that wonderful creativity that you need in the workplace, you can get if you hire amazing neurodivergent people. But you have to support them as well. You can't just hire them and expect them to get on with it. You have to put support into place.
So what would be the ideal support for someone with ADHD who is highly creative? What sort of personality would you want from the person that's actually their kind of support? If I look back, in fact, at my marriage, my ex-husband and I, we may not have lasted as a couple, but we worked together very, very well. And I was obviously the ADHD one, and he was obviously a lot more grounded, although he had other issues, let's say. But I mean, what sort of personality do we want from somebody who's a supportive role, whether it's a partner or a business colleague?
Well, it's almost not even it's almost like what they can do to support you. So I think there's that level of patience and understanding, isn't there? But being kind, this is my whole thing. It doesn't cost anything to be kind. And just like you said at the beginning, you don't know what people are going through, do you? Know, looking after elderly parents, managing teenagers, perimenopause, you might be lonely, someone might have just died, you know, you don't know what people are going through. So I think kindness just is the number one point. Be kind, not knowing what people, you know, don't assume that all people with ADHD or all autistic people are the same. So that, you know, I'm very outwardly ADHD, I'm combined, so I'm both inattentive, away with the fairies, distracted by a butterfly, squirrel, whatever, and very hyperactive. So you see, I use my hands a lot, gesticulate. I talk.
Me too. I never realised that.
I mean,
always feel, you've probably seen my poster, I'm always going like that, and I wonder what I'm doing.
Crystal of the fiddle here. I have to have things to fit, like, you know. You can also be hyperactive internally. I just want to say that as well. So Kelly is also combined. If you met him, you haven't met him, but is much more chilled, man, a few words, but inside it's like it doesn't stop. So it's understanding in the workplace that everybody's different. So if you've hired someone with ADHD, don't be like, oh, she's got ADHD, you two must be the same. You know,
it's not. Like,
no, and it's different ways to communicate. So I love talking to people, but equally, if you then actually want me to do some actions from our meeting or from our conversation, you're going to need to email me them, and you're going to need to tell me what the deadlines are. Don't just be like, oh, in the next week or so. It's like, give me a deadline and check in halfway through. Just be like, how are you getting on with that? Because quite often neurodivergent people work sequentially. So when I had all the talks last week for Neurodiversity Celebration Week, I couldn't really think about the one on the Friday because I had to get through all the others. And so that's quite a new thing for me to understand. And it's fine because I don't work for anyone else. In the workplace, if you've not done that work, you know, think about PR, and you've got this massive campaign launching for some client in 3 months' time, but you've got something happening now, but that's smaller, and that in 3 months' time needs all the planning. Our brains don't work like that, do they? We need to get this little thing out of the way to be able to focus on it. So I
had a big situation this week, like exactly that, where someone was asking me about a plan for June, and I'm like, June? Like, I haven't even got to April yet. You know,
this is it. Yeah. But now you know that's okay. And then you work with people. So, you know, you then find people, we all say, like, at work within a team, you're going to have some people that love planning. When I used to work in PR, they'd be like, can you pull together a plan? I used to be like I've seen our friends where they're like, I don't have a plan. I don't even have a plan. You know, like, I just
have a puff for PR, but I don't know. I mean, and I sort of, like you, I'm sure, we create as we go along. I mean, that's the creative process. So to sort of start thinking too far ahead, it's like there's a block.
But also, we need the dopamine to get it done. So you want me to get some piece of work done? Well, I will get that to you, and it'll be the best goddamn piece of work there is. But the amount of time it's taken me will have been compressed compared to someone else. So it's not how long it's taken you. It's like when you hire a carpenter, you don't want someone that's going to take a week to do that if they can do it in 2 days because they've done it for 20 years and know what they're doing. You just trust the process, don't you? You don't go, well, hold on, you didn't spend a week doing that. You're like, oh, that's great, they did it in 2 days and it's the most beautiful cabinet they've ever made, you know. So I think it's about understanding the benefits that neurodivergent people bring, that everyone's different, and that, you know, finding out the things you put into place benefit everybody. So find out how your team communicate, because some people would hate to, you know, have a random phone call out of the blue. Other people love that, and that's really exciting. Some people want to, you know, just communicate on emails and they've got something to refer back to, or then they can actually know what they've said. You know, I record quite a lot of my phone calls so that I can listen back and just be like, oh no, that what they said was this, because ADHD brains can't decipher what's important. Everything is important to us. Like there's no, so when you like take notes in a meeting, like everything, you're like, I don't actually know what's important now, and we're quite now or next. So
Yeah,
it's
no,
like,
absolutely. I mean, for me, it's as important to remember that the dog's got to be fed as it is to do some contract.
I
And
have to used to have that in a calendar, feed dogs. Yesterday we forgot to feed the dogs. They're fine. But you know, we got to lunchtime and I was like, do you remember I said to feed the dogs? And he's like, completely forgot. You know, there's a lot of but that, like you said, that's just as important as signing a big contract.
yeah,
Because
yeah. No, well, I'm learning an awful lot. And as you said, it was Neurodiversity Week recently, and you were a cover girl. Because you talk such sense, because you're so knowledgeable, because you do such a good job, and because you've got a family that is so representative of so many families, I suspect, who don't have a voice. You've become, in a very big way, the sort of the voice of the neurodiverse family, career woman, professional, advisor, consultant, and there's a huge demand. So, as I started off today saying how many podcasts you've been on recently, you have been so busy. And what was the magazine you were on the cover of?
So Disability Review magazine. I
Disability
got
Review
the cover of
magazine.
that, six-page
Six-page
spread.
article.
Yeah, I was in Top Sante. I think that was 4 pages this month. The lovely health magazine, talking about ADHD and talking about the tour. Yeah, last week was Neurodiversity Celebration Week, and I was asked by Lexic, who hosts Neurodiversity Celebration Week, to chair another panel, and I really, really wanted it to be on women in late diagnosed neurodiversity. Last year, I talked about neurodivergent families, and it was the most popular panel of the week. So I was like, right, it's like 24 panels. I was like, right, the competitiveness in me was
Yeah.
like,
Well, yeah, but you're good at, you know what you're doing. You are the best. You are the best. And I wanted to ask you a couple of other questions on
yeah.
the sort of on following the diagnosis. So I don't know what the diagnosis consists of. Is it a question and answers, or is it that, is it something they find in our blood, or I presume it's not that quite that way. But there's an
So yeah,
awful lot of pharmaceuticals that are doled out for people with neurodiversity. What's your opinion about them
what
generally?
medications and things.
Medication, yeah.
So there is such, I can't remember the statistics off the top of my head, and I don't want to give false statistics, but there is such a tiny amount of people that are taking ADHD medication. So there's this whole like conspiracy theory that big pharmaceuticals, they are, making sure loads of people are getting diagnosed with ADHD, and 20% of people are taking medication. They're not at all. It's an absolute mess at the moment because there's still such a shortage in ADHD medication. So if you want to take medication, take medication. If it's going to work for you, for some people it works brilliantly, for others it really doesn't.
And what does working brilliantly actually look like?
Getting rid of all the noise and being able to focus.
Okay.
So for some people it literally has saved their
So
job.
one could sort of look at that and say it dumbs people down and takes away their creativity, the
But then think
pharmaceuticals.
about like HRT.
Yeah, which I also don't like. But anyway, yeah,
I know exactly, and that's what I mean, because you're going to have different opinions on it.
this
Because
is true. This is
because
true.
you're probably not that keen
I mean,
on.
it's a very interesting question. If I was 30 now, and I thought if I start taking these chemicals, if I start taking these medication, I will not end up at 70 odd as I am now with the same, having bought and sold houses, moved around, got divorced, all that stuff won't happen because I'll be on this medication. Would I take that medication?
But
I
it
don't
doesn't
know.
quite work like that.
It
Just
doesn't,
because you
does
take
it?
medication doesn't mean that you're not going to get divorced and move loads. So
Yes, it's true.
what it does is it just helps you focus. Like, so transparency, I've never taken medication, and the reason I've not taken it, even though when I was diagnosed as severe combined ADHD, 100% he was like, you should take medication. And I do wonder, but I've seen the film Limitless with Bradley Cooper. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't. Tell me about
Oh
that.
God, it's so good. So basically, he takes his magic tablet and he can get loads of work done, and he becomes the most successful person ever. But obviously, there are downsides. And I'm a bit like, I'm worried I'd take it, and it's nothing like Limitless. And I'm like, oh, my other worry was that it would quieten all the noise, and then because it only lasts in your body for 12 hours, so it's like it's really short. It doesn't have
Yeah.
any effects. As in, I'm not going to say that, but as in, it lasts for 12 hours and it's out of your system. So then I was like, my brain is so busy and so noisy. What if I really like the quiet, and then the loudness comes back? And then what if the loudness feels even louder? And a really good point to mention is there's a huge overlap between being autistic and ADHD. If you're autistic, 70% chance you've got ADHD. a lot of people realize they're autistic when they take ADHD medication, and almost their more autistic side, it's not technically correct, but the autism traits come out more, and they go, hold on a minute, actually I'm still feeling all these different things. And that's quite often when they can realize they're autistic. But medication's a whole debate in itself, but people literally, excuse me, the statistics for suicide in autistic people and suicide in ADHD is absolutely massive. So if medication is going to help somebody, you're like 12 times.
And there's also a lot of stuff online about autism, particularly where you can take natural medicines of some kind. What is natural and what
you
isn't?
can't take so you can't take medication for being autistic. There's nothing. Right. You can take medication for your mental health, but you can't. So whereas ADHD, you can take medication,
but not actual medication, but sort of more natural herbs and supplements. And
I mean, you can take for ADHD, you can take, ashwagandha, lion's mane. Obviously, if anyone else takes other medications, please make sure they check first. Magnesium's really good.
Magnesium is, I take a lot of magnesium actually. So it's
so it's really interesting. The whole medication thing is a whole big debate. But just in answer to your question at the beginning was, it's an assessment. You need to have evidence from when you were younger, either someone that knew you when you were younger, school reports, something like that. You need to have had the traits from before you were 12. I think that's a really, really key
point. That thing that my school reports certainly said, and most school reports, my children's as well, is must concentrate more. That's the classic one, isn't it?
Yeah, must concentrate more. Mine was, if she let other people speak. I literally found them the other day when we were having moved, and I was just like, oh my days, they're the most ADHD thing ever. Would be really great if she could let other people have a turn sometimes. Lots of views, but shame she doesn't always listen, all these kind of things. But if you've got ADHD, if a child is 12, by the time they're 12, they will have received 20,000 more negative comments than their peers, their siblings, their friends, for the needs to concentrate more, sit still, stop interrupting, do this, do that. So as parents or grandparents or carers, people need to negate those negative comments. And then these children with ADHD grow up to be adults and go out into the workplace and wonder maybe why they're more sensitive than other people, or why they find it difficult to make friends, etc., because they've been told you're too much, you're too loud, you're too this, you're too this. So then they just sort of aren't their true selves.
So there is such a need in today's society, which has so many mental health issues, regardless of neurodiversity, and particularly for young people, because we had lockdown, because we had a lot of people not going back to either work or back to school, but staying at home. The screen situation, which must only damage people, just being on screen all the time, particularly children. There are so many ways that people can not get help. And in fact, the whole situation of ADHD and neurodiversity gets exaggerated by the current world we live in, really. So there is a huge demand, as I said, and there's two big things coming up for you, which I want to come back to in the rest of this year. The first, of course, is the tour. So you're going to be going to, I think, 36 theatres across the country, and we'll do a link below so people can find where and when you're coming near to them. And tell us about the show that you're doing. Let's call it a show, but how would you describe it?
Yeah, I just call it like an evening with ADHD. So it's like you said, it's a UK-wide theatre tour. It's called ADHD Unmasked. I was approached by a really big production company last year, and they said, we've come up with this idea. We'd love to go on tour talking about ADHD, and we'd love you to be the expert. So it's going to be an evening with me. Someone randomly was in the Bucks Free Press this week, and they described it as Hester Grainger's one-woman show. I'm like, oh, I quite like that.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so
you are a one-woman show, actually.
It's just me on stage, so I guess it is one-woman show. And it's an evening, a dopamine, fun-filled evening. It's going to be talking about ADHD. What is it? How to get diagnosed? Parenting, relationships, friendships, work. Me sharing my often random stories. I have ADHD. I don't know what's going to come out, because sometimes I just start talking and stuff happens. And then that's the first half. And then the second half is just going to be really interactive. Loads of questions from the audience. People can ask me pretty much what they want, because nothing's really off limits with me. And it's just going to be a really awesome evening where you get to feel in a safe space. You get to be yourself. You don't have to be ADHD or have ADHD or be neurodivergent to come. It's for, friends, partners, work colleagues. I've got so many different people emailing saying, oh, I've just booked because I want to understand more about my colleague, or, I've booked it because, me and my wife are coming because she's just been diagnosed. So it's going to be awesome.
And you're going to do a little bit of interactive work with the audience on.
Yeah, the second half's the whole second half is interactive. So, because, if you've got ADHD, you don't want to sit there and go, "Oh, I don't want to ask." But equally, there's no pressure to ask questions. You can just listen. You can join in. I'm going to want people to share like their, ADHD moment of the week. Like what's the kind of most ADHD thing has happened this week, etc. So it's going to be awesome. And it's, you can get tickets from Maple Tree Entertainment.
It's going to be absolutely brilliant. And I'm so looking forward to coming to see you in Yeovil. And at the same time, typically, as you are juggling this enormous tour and your consultancies and your coaching and your family, of course, which come number one, you're launching a club, which actually came out of our coaching sessions, I think,
Yeah.
which is the Speedy Brain Society. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I'm finding that very exciting.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Speedy Brain Society has now launched. Someone very wise said, "It'd be really great if you could launch some kind of club or membership." I don't know who that
Was
was.
that me? That was me.
Yeah. Yeah, and we talked about it way before Christmas, and you gave me a deadline and you said you needed to get it done a few months before your tour. And I was like, amazing. So came up with I worked with one of the people I coach actually, called Ali Slater, who's amazing, who's come up with all the branding and the kind of, because I love it all, the brain, and a lady called
Brain's become a little animated character,
animated.
Yeah.
Yeah, Emma Proven made it like with lashes and trainers, Claire often wear trainers and things. And basically it's a vibrant community. It's £20 a month. Kelly the other day did some math and worked out 65p a day. And you get access to me. It's an amazing community. There's loads of free resources. We do lives. We do, catch up with the experts, not me, other people. It's like a place where you can, share the things you're procrastinating about, because that's huge with ADHD. Talk about how we're feeling, wins of the week, whether that's literally getting up out of bed that day or remembering to drink water, or, it doesn't have to be big things, but just a really supportive club and society where people can be themselves, connect with other people. Because when you're neurodivergent, it's so important to connect with people. So it's for anyone with a speedy brain, whatever that means to you. You don't have to be diagnosed. It doesn't have to be ADHD, autism, whatever. It's if you resonate and relate to having a speedy brain, Speedy's Brain Society is for you.
I'm so joining. I always thought I had a speedy brain because I was Aries, but I realise now it's not quite as simple as that.
Quite work out, but
yeah. I love the Speedy Brain Society, not only because I feel a bit like a midwife on it, not really, but you midwifed yourself, but I mean, holding the space for you, certainly. And I just think that so many people will relate to it, and particularly women going through perimenopause and menopause who think they're going crazy, which they're not. But,
You've just hit the nail on the head. People think they're going crazy. I literally had a message from a woman the other day being like, "Oh, I don't know," a bit like is it just pharmaceuticals and is it this, and actually it's just conspiracy. And they were like, it's not, is it? And I'm like, no. And I think as women, we're gaslit, aren't we, with our medical conditions, and there's so much around that. So, we talked really briefly, I just really want to touch on this before we end, but that so many women are misdiagnosed with borderline personality disorder, bipolar, general mental health conditions, depression, anxiety. Oh, because it couldn't possibly be ADHD, could it? Or they couldn't possibly be autistic, because that's not what autism looks like. Or I had someone messaging me saying, well, I don't really know if I can have ADHD because I went to uni and I got married. I'm like, that's what we're dealing with, is this level of, or lack of understanding. And that's why I coach people.
Yeah, no, it brings up somebody that comes to mind straight away, actually, is the wonderful Sinead O'Connor, who was a dear friend. And I first met her and worked with her on What Women Want, which was 30 years ago, as you know, where I'm planning, which I'm hoping you're going to very much be part of, a whole What Women Want 30 years on, what do we want today? And Sinead was given so many different medications, and she told me she was medicated loads of times with schizophrenia and God knows. When I look back, I'm sure it was as simple as ADHD. She was full of ideas. She was a creative woman. I mean, I know she had difficult upbringing and that influenced what happened to her, but still, and I don't know exactly the details of why she passed away so early, a year or so ago, but I know she's always told me about all the medication that she was on. I think that had a lot to do with it. So if only we could have more open discussions the way you do and the way you are and the way you will be about the importance of actually being neurodiverse in society. And if we did acknowledge it more, valued it more, followed our pathways that actually resonate in the best way for our particular needs and dopamine fixes and whatever it is, we could truly come together and create a better world, which is, of course, what we all want and what I'm totally committed to. So, you are an amazing and very, very important human being, Hester Grainger. I love you very much. And I'm so glad that we've been working together and we talked together today, and we will continue to be connected with each other. And I learn so much from you every time we speak, and I'm so grateful, and so do so many others. Is there anything you'd like to add before we finish off this podcast today?
Just that I love you too, and the feeling is very mutual. Like I said, when you said that you could coach me, I was like, with my background in PR, I was like, oh my days. And then you just turned out to be the most loveliest person ever, which I couldn't wish for. So thank you. I think the main thing is to, whatever your situation is, to like find your tribe, find your vibe. I always say that, you know, surround yourself by radiators, not drains.
That's
Look
great.
at the situation. Yeah, but to realize that actually I'm putting myself in these situations and I don't know why, and it doesn't feel great. Remove yourself within reason, you know, how you can. And I just think it's like, you know, the main thing is be kind, isn't it? Is be kind and treat people nicely, because then the world will be just a much nicer place.
Much nicer place, which is what you do every time. So I'm looking forward to seeing you on your tour, if not before. Yeah. And thank you so, so much. And much, much love. I hope you enjoyed listening to my very interesting chat with Hester Grainger about ADHD and how we can use it as a positive force in our lives. The unique seed exercise that I thought goes with this very interesting conversation is being aware of how many neurodiverse people we may know in our lives, and actually how important it is to have a society made up of neurodiverse people, because if we were all the same, how boring that would be. I look back at my childhood and how we at school were always put into some kind of narrow box. And the important thing is to be able to be free, to be dreamers, to be artists, to be creatives, to be scientists, because that's what makes the world work. If you enjoyed what you heard and would like to learn more practical methods to help you sow your seeds in your empowerment journey, then please subscribe to this podcast, rate it and review. Also, please make sure you visit lynnefranks.com, where you can join my mailing list if you haven't already, and together with thousands of like-minded women, become part of my seed network, meeting up through my coaching courses, seed programs and retreats. See you next time, when I am joined in a very uplifting conversation with the extraordinary award-winning landscape designer Lulu Arquette, when we are talking about how we humans can restore the land, look after Mother Nature, and live in a way that respects her and ourselves. See you then.